Hey everybody, welcome back to video number 3 in the series called The Beginner's Guide to Piano. If you haven't watched parts 1 and 2, I'd highly recommend you do so, as each one of these videos builds on top of the previous one. And today we're going to be talking a little theory. Now these are things that are just going to help you play along with other people, play with some lead sheets or chord charts, and also to help you start being able to read music. Now here's the thing about reading music. At first, it's hard and you have to really think about it, but just like normal reading, eventually it becomes second nature. So I'm going to give you a few hacks to remember note names, and then as you use those, you'll eventually get to the point where you stop having to use those and you just know the notes. So if you've looked at any bit of piano music, you will have seen that there are two groups of lines. There's the top one and the bottom one. Now the bottom one with the really squiggly line, which is called the treble clef, is for your right hand typically. The bottom line with the backwards C, that's for your left hand. That's the bass clef. Now if we were to look at the top one, the treble clef, there are 5 different lines. And here's how you remember which notes go on those lines. Every good boy deserves fudge. So when you think about it like that, the bottom line is E for every. The second line is G for good. The middle line is B for boy. The fourth line is D, deserves. And then the top line is F for fudge. So that's how you remember the lines. And then the spaces are actually super easy. From bottom to top, they just spell face. So they go F, A, C, and E. Now, if you remember those two things, you'll be able to figure out any note that is on those lines or on those spaces. Now, there are 2 other really important notes that those 2 things don't take care of, and those are C and D, or CD, right? And those are the 2 notes below the staff that connect the bass clef to the treble clef. Now, D hangs on the bottom line. It's almost like it's grabbing on and hanging off. And then C floats by itself on a line, and it's called middle C. And that connects the bass clef and the treble clef together. So if you just remember CD, every good boy deserves fudge, and face, you will be able to discern and figure out all the important notes on the treble clef. Now what about the bass clef? The way I started out remembering the notes on the bass clef is basically the same way on the treble clef, but just a little different. And that was good boys deserve fudge always. So from bottom to top, you have G, B, D, and then F, A. Good boys deserve fudge always. Now for the spaces, how I remembered those was just face, but this time you're starting on kind of the infinite space that hangs off of the bottom of the bass clef. So F hangs off the bottom of the bass clef, and then the first space between 2 lines is A, then you have C, then you have E, and then one more with G, and then that's it. And that's how, those are some hacks to remember the note names on the staff. And because you already know the note names on the piano, then you can start transferring that from the staff to the piano. And eventually, before you know it, it'll become second nature. Now, the next thing we're going to be talking about are chord charts or lead sheets. These are super helpful for anyone who kind of wants to jam with people, who wants to play the keys in the church setting or anything like that. So here's how you read those. Typically, there are 3 symbols in a chord chart. You have the big letter, is anywhere from A to G, the note names. And then you're going to have a capital M or lowercase m. And then you're going to have something like a sus4 or a 7 floating on top. So if we had a chord that was called C, capital M, 7, that means you're wanting to play a C major 7 chord, right? You already know what C major looks like if you've watched part 2. The 7 is just the 7th note away from C. So if you count C, D, E, F, G, A, B, then B is the 7th of C. Let's do another example. Let's do A flat major with a sus4. So what would that look like? You'd have A with a flat symbol above it, and then a capital M for A flat major, and then you'll see sus4 written above it. Now what that means is instead of playing the 3rd of the chord, which in this case would be C, you would actually play the 4th of the chord, which is D flat. So what you'd actually do is if you count out from A flat, B flat, C, D flat, that's the note you're going to be playing. So any of these chord charts and all these symbols you can figure out as long as you know what the symbol means. And as you practice, it's going to become more and more second nature. So how do you start practicing after this video? Well, I would highly recommend you just Google your favorite song and then put chords PDF at the end of the name and start practicing those chords, and use what you've learned about lead sheets and chord labels to figure out and discern what you need to play. And before you know it, it's going to be second nature for you to do that. I'd also highly recommend just playing around with some sheet music and figure out what you can do, and keep referring back to this video with the hacks of every good boy deserves fudge and face for the treble clef, and then good boys deserve fudge always, and then face starting one space lower on the bass clef, and see what happens. I'll see you guys for part 4.